Alright, what's good? This video is going to be a comprehensive guide to buying an iPhone all the way from the iPhone 15 Pro Max down to the iPhone 6s and SE first generation. The way that I put all these iPhones into each category was based on its performance, its longevity, features, and overall value when you compare it to all the things that it has to offer. But stay tuned. At the end of the video, I might reorganize this list and share my final thoughts on all this. Let's get into it. So first, to start off with this buying guide, I'm gonna start with the biggest and latest, the iPhone 15 Pro Max. In my opinion, I think the iPhone 15 Pro Max is worth it because it offers all the newest features. It's gonna have top tier battery life compared to, most of the other phones on the market. I think that is worth it. Like right now, if you don't have an iPhone prior to this, if you don't have the 14 Pro, the 13 Pro, I think the iPhone 15 Pro Max is 100% worth it. Alright, so next we have the iPhone 15 Pro. I also think this one is worth it. It's, like I said, the latest and greatest. It doesn't have as many new features as the 15 Pro Max, and it doesn't have as good a battery life, but it is still a really good iPhone. Next we have the 15 Plus. I think the 15 Plus is low-key borderline worth it, and borderline great value. The reason being is that it's not as expensive as the 15 Pro Max, but it has the camera system from the 14 Pro Max, and it also has dynamic island and USB-C, which I think is a good bonus for iPhones in 2023. So that's why I'll put it in between best value and worth it. Next is the base model iPhone 15. I think it is also worth it. Again, it comes with some newer features. It's an actual upgrade from the base model iPhone 13. I think these iPhones are definitely worth it. If you're buying an iPhone for the first time, or you're upgrading from a really old iPhone, they're worth it. Especially more worth it than last year's iPhone 14s, which were the same as the 13s, just one extra GPU core. And now we have the iPhone 14 Plus. I would say the iPhone 14 Plus is between worth it and great on a budget, just because it's probably a lot cheaper nowadays and you can probably find it for a good price. So if you want a big iPhone, but you don't need 120 hertz, you don't need a third camera, and then also you want the best battery life that you can get on an iPhone, probably the 14 Plus is good for that. Yeah, but the key thing about that is the good price. If you can find a really good price for the 14 Plus, it's a good buy. Great on a budget. And then the 14 base model, just don't buy that. Like literally, if you're gonna buy the 14 base model, you might as well just get the 13. And then next up we got the 13 series. So for me, I'll put the 13 in great on a budget because I think the prices are pretty good for it. 13 mini is best value because it's the last mini phone. It has good battery life, good cameras, a good screen. It's an overall really good phone that will last a long time, will be updated for a long time, and it's the last of its kind at the moment. 13 Pro Max, in my opinion, is the best value iPhone that you can get right now today in 2023. I just think the 13 Pro Max was so good that, people who have 13 Pro Max, they should not upgrade. Maybe until a couple years later. I don't think the 15 Pro Max is worth upgrading from if you have a 13 Pro Max or even a 13 Pro, unless you want better battery life as a 13 Pro. But the 13 Pro Max is best battery life, really good cameras, 120 hertz screen. It's everything that is good about iPhones nowadays, but it's not as new. The 13 Pros, I think, is worth it, in between worth it and great on the budget, because again, you can get them for cheaper. So if you want a Pro iPhone but not at the most expensive price, then get a 13 Pro. 14 Pro Max, I would say, is worth it. The price is gonna be cheaper, especially because the new iPhone is just launched. So you can get a 14 Pro Max for a good price. It has dynamic island. It introduced the higher megapixel camera for the first time on an iPhone in a long time. And yeah, it's just an overall good phone. And then the 14 Pro, to be honest, I would put the 14 Pro in decent option. For me, the base model Pros they're really good. They're Pro iPhones, but for me, what holds them back is just the battery life. Like, it's not as good as the Pro Maxes. The thing is, the Pro Maxes are so amazing, it's hard not to recommend the Pro Max over the Pro. I would put the SE3 in between worth it and great on a budget, just because it's as powerful as the 13s, but in the body of an iPhone 8. Next is the 12 Pro Max. To be honest, don't buy this thing. The 12 series, in my opinion, are some of the worst iPhones that Apple has ever made. I don't think they're good. I don't think they're worth buying over the 13s or even the 11s. I would say just avoid the 12 Pro Max, the 12 Pro, and even the 12. Like, just don't skip those ones. That also includes the 12 mini. Just skip it. Get the 13 mini if you're gonna get a mini phone. Okay, so next we have the 11 series, I would put the 11 Pro Max, surprisingly enough, in the best value category. To me, the 11 Pro Max is one of the best iPhones you can buy nowadays because it combines a few things. It has decent battery life. It has really good cameras. This is the first Pro iPhone that Apple has ever made. It has a big screen just like the other Pro Maxes, and it's really cheap. That is majority of why I think it's one of the best value iPhones you can buy right now, because it combines the price and the performance and what you get, the overall package, into something that is worth it in 2023. So it's a best value iPhone. The 11 Pro, however, I would say is great on a budget because it'll be a little bit cheaper than the 11 Pro Max, but it's not as good. It doesn't have as good battery life. And then similarly, I'll put the 11 series base model in great on a budget just because it's a decent iPhone and there's nothing spectacularly amazing about it, but it is a really good iPhone. And if you need a cheap iPhone, don't hesitate to buy the 11 series. Next, we have the SE second generation, and actually revisiting the SE third generation. I would put them both in decent option just because looking at the prices for the SE third generation, it's a bit expensive. And if you're going to get that, you might as well get another option like the 13 mini, for example. So yeah, both of them are decent options, but I'll put the SE second generation as a lower tier decent option. Next, we have the 10s Max. I would say the 10s Max is surprisingly, maybe surprising to you, not to me. This is obviously not to me. This is one of the best value iPhones out here in 2023, in my opinion. It has the decently sized screen. It has 3D touch. It has the dual camera system at the back, and it's overall just a good iPhone that will still last you a couple more years. And yeah, this is just a solid iPhone to buy for a cheap price. I would even choose the 10s Max over the base model 11, over the base model 11 Pro. I just think the 10s Max is an underrated iPhone that you can buy right now and be happy with. It can still play all your top tier games, maybe not to the same setting, especially if you play Genshin Impact, but every other game it can play that fine, comfortably. Alright, so next we got the 10R. I would put the 10R and don't buy, because if you're going to buy a 10R, you might as well just get a 10S, which we have right here. 10S is a great on a budget iPhone. I would put it lower tier, great on a budget, because if you're going to buy that, then in my eyes, you would get something better like a 11 Pro or a base model 11 or a base model 13. And then we have the 10. The 10 is also don't buy it because there's other iPhones that are just better than the 10 that you can buy for around a similar price range or even just a little bit more. Then we have the 8 Plus. In my opinion, the 8 Plus is a decent option because it's a similar experience to the SE3. If you're somebody who values, Touch ID and just this form factor of iPhone, some people really like how it looks and enjoy it, then this iPhone is here for you. And it also has wireless charging. I think Apple added wireless charging with the iPhone 7, and the 8 Plus has that. And it's just an overall decent iPhone even in 2023. It's been updated, I think, until earlier this year. And it has widgets, it has stuff like that. It even has features that current iPhones don't have, like rotating your home screen. So the 8 Plus is a good value iPhone for people who like this form factor and would like to use Touch ID for a little bit longer. Okay, so now we got the base model 8. I would put that in don't buy, because if you're going to buy that, then just get the SE. There is no advantage over an SE2 or an SE3. And then the same for the 7 Plus and the 7. Just don't buy those iPhones. Like, there's better options in the 8 Plus and the SEs. And for the 6S Plus and the 6, just don't buy those either, because it's literally the same reason. I think if you want one of these form factor iPhones, then just get an 8 Plus or an SE2 or an SE3. And then lastly, we have the iPhone SE first generation. I would put this in borderline decent option and borderline don't buy this. My reason for that is because the SE first generation is one of a kind. It is currently the only iPhone that has the body and form factor of an iPhone 5 that still functions well in 2023. This iPhone was updated up until iOS 15.7 in 2022. So only last year, and it still functions well in 2023. The only downside to this iPhone is that the battery life is really small compared to newer phones. But if you really like the small form factor, you like the body of the iPhone 5 and maybe even the reminiscent of the iPhone 4 series, then I think the iPhone SE has some value in 2023 still, because it functions well, has a headphone jack, and you can buy all the accessories for it really cheap because Nobody uses this iPhone that much anymore. So it has some value even in 2023, which is why I'll put it borderline decent option, borderline don't buy it, because there are better options that you can buy that will perform better for you and last a little bit longer for you. All right, so I'm just going to share my final thoughts. I've reorganized the list a little bit. Basically, what I did was I moved the iPhone 6s from decent option to don't buy, because that's where it's meant to be. If you really want to save as much money as you can, then buy the SE second generation instead of the iPhone 6s. I moved the iPhone 10R to borderline don't buy this and borderline decent option, because I think the iPhone 10R, it has the same power as the 10s and the 10s Max. It feels like, I can't say it's a bad phone necessarily because it's very similar to those two phones. It doesn't have as much features, it doesn't have as good cameras or even as good screen, but it still has the same processor with one less gigabyte of RAM, and it will still perform decently even in 2023. It's just not as good when you can also buy the other phones that I mentioned. And then I moved the 14 Plus down to decent option / don't buy this, because just looking at the price range, you could get better options. Like you could get a Pro model iPhone for around the same price as this one and be happy. Even an iPhone 13 Pro Max, like I seen some really good prices for that phone that are even cheaper than 14 Pluses on the aftermarket. So that's why I moved it down here. Then I also moved the 15 Plus to decent option, because although I think the 15 Plus is a really good phone, really good battery life, most likely it has newer features than the iPhone 14 series offered. It's an actual upgrade from the base model 13. But the reason why I moved it to decent option is because the price tag. If you can get it secondhand for a little bit cheaper than the MSRP, then that is blessed and it's a good phone. Even if you buy from Apple, it's still a good phone, really good value. But the price is a little bit expensive. You can take that same money and get a 13 Pro Max. You can take that same money and even get an iPhone 14 Pro Max for a similar price. Maybe in like a year or two, I think that will be a best value iPhone, because the price will drop 100%, I guarantee it. But yeah, overall, this is the list. This is my iPhone buying guide in 2023. Hopefully this helps bring you some clarity. Hopefully, you can come to a decision for what iPhone you might want to buy in the near future or right now. With all that being said though, I do think every single iPhone on this list, even the ones in don't buy, still can serve you well. I think they're all great phones to use. They can still perform decently in 2023 just because of how good they were made. I feel like the biggest issue you might run into with some of the older iPhones and some of the iPhones in the don't buy this list is the battery. Outside of battery life and even how it performs in different temperatures, weathers, I think every iPhone on this list can serve you well in 2023, and I think your average person would be fine with a lot of these. But yeah, that is my iPhone 2023 buying guide, and we out. Peace.